It was a quiet evening on the edge of the human colony world, where the wind howled through the trees and the stars shone brightly in the cold sky. Eli Vance, a former soldier turned recluse, lived alone in a small cabin near the edge of the forest. His days were spent in peaceful solitude, fixing machines and tending to his garden. He didn't have much to do, and he liked it that way. The past had left him with more scars than he cared to remember, and isolation seemed like the safest place to be. But that night, something was different. It was late, and the storm outside had begun to grow stronger. Eli was sitting by the fire reading a book when he heard the faintest knock on his door. At first he thought it was the wind playing tricks on him, but the knock came again, faint but urgent. Eli frowned. Visitors were rare in this part of the world. He wasn't used to unexpected company. He stood up, his boots echoing on the wooden floor, and walked cautiously toward the door. As he reached for the handle, he couldn't help but wonder who would be out here in such a storm. The moment he opened the door, the cold wind swept in, carrying with it the sharp bite of snow and the unmistakable scent of alien life. Standing before him was a woman, though not a human woman. She was tall and slender, her skin a deep shade, of violet that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Her hair was silver white and fell in waves around her shoulders. Her eyes, though wide and fearful, had a certain glow, almost like they were made to reflect the light of stars, and in her arms, she held 2 children. The woman was drenched, her clothes clinging to her body as if they had been soaked through by the storm. The children were wrapped in what appeared to be thin blankets shivering violently in the cold air. One child, a boy, had bright green skin and large black eyes, while the girl beside him looked more human than her brother, but her face was elongated, and her hair glowed with faint hues of blue. Eli's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't seen aliens in years, and he had certainly never seen a creature like this one before. Despite the cold, the woman's gaze was intense, almost pleading. She seemed to be holding herself together by sheer will alone, but Eli could see the exhaustion in her eyes. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but firm. "I will warm your bed, human. Just don't let my children die." Eli stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do. His instincts told him to be careful. Aliens were often unpredictable, and the world they lived in was dangerous. But something about this woman's voice, the desperation in her eyes, made him hesitate. She wasn't asking for much, just shelter for the night, perhaps. After a moment's pause, Eli stepped aside, silently motioning for her to enter. The woman staggered forward, her feet barely able to keep up with the weight of her own body. Eli quickly moved to help her steady herself, and the children followed close behind, their eyes wide with fear. "Come inside," Eli said softly, his voice unusually gentle. He led them toward the fireplace where the flames crackled warmly. The cabin was small but cozy, with simple furniture and warm lighting. He gestured for them to sit, offering them a place by the fire. The woman gave him a grateful nod, though she didn't speak again. She placed the children down on the floor next to her, and Eli quickly fetched dry towels to help warm them up. The little boy's skin was cold to the touch, and the girl's lips were tinged with blue. They were clearly suffering from the cold, and Eli's heart tightened with concern. He had to act quickly. "I'll get you some food," he said, moving toward the small kitchen area. But before he could do anything, the woman spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you," she said, her eyes filled with gratitude and something else. Fear, perhaps. We have no other place. My name is Viola." Eli paused, for a moment looking back at her. "Eli," he replied, "you're safe here for now. I'll make sure you're taken care of." Viola nodded but didn't say anything more. Instead, she turned her attention to her children, her hands gently brushing their hair as she tried to comfort them. Eli could see how much they meant to her, how deeply she loved them. It wasn't just survival for her. It was the need to protect her children at all costs. He worked quickly, boiling water and preparing a simple meal of soup and bread. As the smell of food filled the cabin, the children seemed to relax, their tense bodies softening as they caught the scent. Viola, too, seemed to breathe a little easier, though her eyes still looked distant. She wasn't here just for shelter. She was running from something. Once the food was ready, Eli placed the bowls in front of them and sat down across from the woman. "You're safe here for now," he repeated. "But I need to know more. What happened to you?" Viola hesitated, her gaze flickering to the children, but she nodded slowly. "We were forced to leave. My people and my mate died. We had no choice but to flee." Eli could tell that this wasn't just about a lost home. It was something much bigger, something that had put her life and the lives of her children in danger. The questions piled up in his mind, but he didn't press her. Not yet. The answers would come in time. For now, all that mattered was that they were safe. As they ate in silence, the storm outside began to calm. The wind's howls softened, replaced by the gentle crackling of the fire. Eli sat back in his chair, watching the small family as they tried to relax, each in their own way, and for the first time in years he felt a strange warmth in his heart. He didn't know what would happen next, but one thing was certain. This night had changed everything. The fire crackled softly in the corner of the small cabin, its warm glow dancing across the walls as the wind outside continued to howl. "Eli." Vance sat at the table, his hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea. His thoughts were a whirlwind, trying to make sense of the strange encounter that had happened just hours earlier. He had always kept to himself, and he liked it that way. It was easier to live alone, without the complications of other people. But now, in the silence of his cabin, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just shifted in a way he hadn't expected. Across the room, Viola sat by the fire with her children. She was cradling the smaller child in her arms, gently rocking her back and forth, her eyes distant. The older child, a boy, had curled up on the floor with a blanket wrapped around him, though he kept glancing up at Eli, his big black eyes filled with curiosity. The boy looked like he was still unsure about this human who had opened his door to them, but there was a certain trust slowly forming. Eli watched them quietly. The woman and her children were different, unlike anything he had ever seen before. He had encountered a few aliens in his time, but none had the grace and mystery of Viola. There was something about her calm demeanor, her quiet strength, that drew him in. It wasn't just her appearance. It was the way she carried herself, as if she had experienced more than most could ever imagine. The children, though, were the most surprising part. They didn't seem to belong in this world, and yet, here they were in his small cabin, relying on him for protection. He felt an unexpected sense of responsibility toward them. Viola finally spoke, her voice low but steady. "Thank you for your kindness," she said, her words almost like a soft murmur. She didn't look at Eli as she spoke, her gaze fixed on her children. "I know it's strange to ask for help, but we had nowhere else to go." Eli nodded, unsure of how to respond. He wasn't good at conversations like this, especially when they touched on things that felt far beyond his understanding. Instead of saying anything, he simply nodded again, hoping she would continue. Viola turned her head slightly, her silver hair catching the light from the fire. "My people. We were once great," she said quietly, her voice tinged with sorrow. "But all of that is gone now. We have been betrayed. My mate. He died protecting us, and now I am alone. I am all they have left." Eli didn't know what to say. He couldn't imagine losing everything, being hunted, forced to flee. He had seen violence in his past, but never something that left someone as broken as Vela seemed to be. There was more to her story. He could feel it, but she wasn't ready to share everything. Instead of pressing, Eli decided to focus on the children. The boy had stopped looking at him and was now gently playing with a small piece of wood he had found near the fire. The little girl, still in Viola's arms, seemed to be dozing off, her small face peaceful for the first time since they had arrived. Eli stood and walked over to the fire, adding another log to the flames. The warmth spread, filling the room, and for a moment the world outside seemed far away. Everything felt so normal, as if they had always been here, as if Viola and her children belonged. The silence stretched on, and it was Viola who broke it, again. "You must have questions," she said, her voice soft. She looked up at him, her violet eyes searching his face. "I will answer what I can, but there are things I cannot say yet." Eli hesitated. He was curious, but there was also a deep respect for her silence. "I just want to know if you're safe here," he said finally, his voice steady. "I want to help, but I need to know more. What are you running from, Viola? Why did you leave? Your home?" Viola took a deep breath, and for a moment her eyes clouded with pain. She seemed to be weighing her words carefully, as if each one carried the weight of a story she wasn't sure she was ready to tell. "The Tharoon," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "We were once a proud people, known across the stars. But there are those who sought to destroy us. We trusted them, trusted too easily, and they betrayed us. My mate, my family, they died because of it." Eli didn't speak, but his heart ached for her. He couldn't imagine the pain of losing everything, of being forced to flee with nothing but the clothes on your back. "I came here because I heard humans could help," Vela continued, her voice stronger now, though there was a deep sadness in her tone. "I heard you had resources, technology, and most importantly, you had a place where I could protect my children. I don't know how long we can stay here, but I had no other choice." Eli nodded, understanding the weight of her words. This wasn't just about shelter. This was about survival. As Viola spoke, Eli felt the gravity of her situation settling in. He couldn't just turn them away, no matter how dangerous it might be to get involved. The stakes were too high, and the children's lives were too precious. "We'll figure something out," Eli said, more to himself than to her. "But you're safe here for now. You don't need to worry about anything tonight." For a brief moment, the tension in the room lifted. Viola's shoulders seemed to relax, and she closed her eyes in relief. Eli couldn't help but feel a little lighter too, knowing that for at least one night they could rest without fear. The fire continued to burn brightly, casting long shadows across the room, and as the storm outside slowly began to die down, a new sense of calm settled over the small cabin. Eli didn't know what the future held for him or for Vela and her children, but for the first time in a long while, he felt that he wasn't completely alone in the world anymore. The days following Vela's arrival passed quietly. Eli Vance settled into his usual routine, though everything seemed subtly different now. The quiet of the cabin was filled with the soft murmurs of Viola tending to her children, and the sound of the fire crackling had a new sense of warmth to it. As much as Eli had enjoyed his solitude before, it now felt less complete. There was something about having others in his space, especially people so far removed from anything he had ever known, that made his life feel fuller. He found himself making more of an effort too, fixing the old stove in the corner, checking the air vents for drafts, anything that might make them more comfortable. Vela was still distant. She spent most of her time caring for her children, rarely speaking of her past, but it was clear from her quiet demeanor and watchful eyes that there was much more to her story than she had shared. Every time Eli tried to ask more, she would give him a polite but firm answer, always just enough to make him understand she had no choice but to run, but never enough to give him the full picture. One evening, as they sat together by the fire, Vela broke the silence. "I've made arrangements," she said, her voice unusually steady. "There are contacts, people who can help." Eli looked up from the small task he was working on. "Who are these people?" he asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. He was cautious. While he trusted Vela, more than he had trusted most people in a long time, he knew that in the world they lived in, trusting the wrong person could be dangerous. They are part of a network, a group that helps those who are hunted," she explained, avoiding his gaze. "They may be able to get my children and me to safety. It will take time. Weeks, maybe more, but I have no other choice." Eli leaned, back in his chair, thinking. This network, whoever they were, had clearly been important to Vela. He had no doubt that the urgency in her voice was real, but something about the whole situation bothered him. Why hadn't she told him more before? He had opened his door to her, offered her shelter, and now he was learning that she was planning to leave. "But why come here?" Eli asked, his voice softer now. "Why me? I don't even know who these people are. And you didn't tell me about them before. Why wait until now?" Viola's gaze flickered to the fire, and she took a deep breath. "I didn't want to put you in danger," she said quietly. "The journey here wasn't easy, and it's not over yet. I thought I could find a safe place for us alone, but it's clear that won't happen. The world outside this cabin isn't safe for me or my children. I didn't want you involved." Eli felt a pang of something, perhaps hurt or maybe just confusion. It wasn't the first time someone had kept secrets from him, but for some reason it stung more this time. He had offered his home and his trust without hesitation, and now he was learning that there was more to the story, things he hadn't been told. "I understand," Eli said, after a long pause. He wasn't sure if he did, but he tried to make her feel less guilty for the decision she had made. "I just need to know what's going on. I'm not asking for all the details, Vela, but I can't protect you if I don't know what's coming." She nodded, her expression softening. "I'm sorry. It's hard to explain." Eli wasn't sure what else to say. He had spent so much time trying to avoid involvement in anything bigger than himself, and now here he was, tangled in something far beyond his quiet life on the edge of the colony. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that Viola's problems were his problems now, especially since her children were in his care. That night, he stayed awake longer than usual. The wind had died down, leaving the sky clear and cold, the stars shining brightly outside. As the hours passed, Eli found himself thinking about the world beyond his small cabin, a world that suddenly seemed much closer, much more real than it had in years. The next morning, Eli woke to find Viola standing by the window, her arms crossed, over her chest staring out at the snowy landscape. The children were still asleep, nestled in blankets near the fire. She didn't seem to hear Eli's footsteps as he approached her. "You don't have to leave, you know," Eli said softly, standing next to her. "I know you've made your plans, but I can help you. We can find a way." Vela turned to him, her eyes meeting his for the first time that morning. She smiled faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I appreciate that, Eli. But I have to keep them safe. They're everything I have left. If I stay here, the people I'm running from will come for us, and I can't put you in that kind of danger." Eli looked out at the white landscape. Beyond the window, the cold beauty of the snow-covered world stretching out for miles. "I can handle danger," he said quietly, though he wasn't entirely sure if he meant it. He had always kept his distance from trouble, but this felt different. He didn't want to be left behind. Vela turned back toward the window, her expression hardening. "Maybe, but you don't understand the kind of danger we're in. They won't stop until they've found us. And when they do, it won't just be us they come for." The words hung heavy between them. Eli could see the pain in her eyes, the burden she carried. Whatever she was running from wasn't just a threat to her. It was a threat to everything and everyone she loved. "I'll help," Eli said finally. "Whatever it takes." Viola nodded, though it was clear she didn't believe him completely. "You don't know what you're getting into." "Maybe not," Eli said with a half smile. "But I've never been one to walk away from something when it matters." And so, as the day went on, the weight of their conversation settled over. The small cabin like the quiet snow outside. Viola had her secrets. Eli had his questions. And though neither of them could know what the future held, one thing was clear. Their lives were tied together now, in ways they couldn't yet fully understand. The days grew longer, and the weather outside the cabin became more unpredictable. Snowstorms seemed to come and go without warning, and the winds howled louder each time, carrying with them an eerie sense of something just out of reach. Inside, though, the cabin remained warm and safe. Eli Vance had grown used to having Vela and her children around. His solitary life had been replaced by the sounds of laughter, coughing, and the occasional clatter of small feet running across the floor. However, despite the comfort of the cabin, the weight of the situation was always present, hanging like a shadow. Vela had told him very little about the true nature of her past or what she was running from, but there were times when he could see glimpses of her fear. Her eyes would flicker nervously when she thought he wasn't looking, and she often moved as though she were expecting danger at any moment. Eli couldn't ignore it any longer. He had seen enough in his years as a soldier to know when someone was on edge. And Vila was more than just on edge, she was haunted by something. There was an urgency in the way she spoke, a quiet desperation that seemed to seep into her every word. One evening, as they sat around the fire, Vila spoke again, her voice tinged with worry. "We can't stay here much longer," she said, her fingers nervously running over the fabric of her cloak. Her eyes met Eli's, and for the first time he saw a flicker of something he hadn't seen before. Fear. "They're getting closer. I can feel it. My people. The ones who are after us, they won't stop until they've found us." Eli's chest tightened at her words. The peaceful life he had tried to rebuild after his time as a soldier now seemed distant. He had offered help to Vila and her children, but he hadn't realized just how deep the danger ran. He stood up, his mind racing. "Who's coming for you?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "You keep mentioning they. Who are they, Vela? And why won't you tell me more?" Vela looked at him, her violet eyes full of pain. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but then paused. Her gaze shifted to the children who were asleep in the corner, tucked under a blanket near the fire. They had been quiet for the most part, adjusting to their new surroundings, but even they seemed to sense the tension in the air. "I can't explain everything, Eli," Viola said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "but you need to understand. There are people who will stop at nothing to destroy us. My people, the Tharun, were once strong, once proud. But now we're hunted. The ones who are after us aren't just looking for me. They want my children too. They think that if they capture us, they can use us as a tool, a way to get what they want." Eli felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard of violent groups in the galaxy, but this was something else. He hadn't realized the extent of what she was running from, what her children were running from. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Eli asked, his voice low, the concern in his eyes clear. He had no intention of backing out of helping them, but he needed to understand what he was facing. "I couldn't," Viola replied, her voice quivering slightly. "I couldn't risk drawing them here. I thought we could stay hidden. I thought I could protect them, but I see now that it was a mistake. They're getting closer, Eli. I can feel it. The last thing I want is for them to find this place, to bring their chaos here." Eli paced across the cabin, his thoughts racing. His instincts told him to trust Viola, but the situation was growing increasingly complicated. What were the odds that her enemies wouldn't follow them to his door? What if they had already discovered where they were hiding? He turned back to Vela, his voice firm but kind. "Then we'll prepare," he said. "We won't just sit here waiting for them to come. I won't let them hurt you or your children. I'll protect you, Viola. You've already done so much. For us. Let me do the same for you." Vela's eyes softened for a moment and she nodded, but her expression was still clouded with worry. "You don't understand, Eli. They're not like any enemies you've fought before. These are people who will stop at nothing. They're ruthless. They've tracked us across planets, and if they find us, they'll burn everything to the ground. I've seen what they do." Eli's determination didn't waver. He wasn't about to let fear control the situation. "Then we'll make sure they don't find us. I'll do whatever it takes. We're going to get ready. We'll be smart about this." For the first time, Vela looked truly unsure. She didn't doubt his abilities, but she feared what might happen to him. What might happen to them all. "I don't want you to get hurt," she whispered, her voice tinged with regret. Eli walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You've already saved us, Viola," he said with quiet certainty. "Now it's my turn to return the favor." The two of them sat in silence for a long while, the fire crackling softly in front of them. The room felt warmer now, not just from the fire but from the shared understanding between them. They had a plan, or at least they would have one, but for now, they needed to prepare. In the days that followed, Eli began taking small steps to reinforce the cabin. He worked quickly, knowing that time was short. He fixed the locks, checked every window, and made sure that the surrounding area was secure. Vela helped where she could, though she still looked uneasy. She would occasionally slip into a quiet corner, her eyes distant, as if she were remembering something painful. But she didn't protest. She knew they had to be ready too. As the weather outside grew colder, and the first signs of winter took hold of the land, the two of them, along with the children, prepared for whatever was coming. Neither of them knew how soon it would be, but one thing was clear. The danger wasn't just outside. It was drawing nearer with every passing day. The days grew shorter as winter tightened its grip on the world outside the cabin. Eli Vance had never been one for much excitement, but as the situation with Vila and her children deepened, he found himself more aware of the world around him. Every creak of the cabin, every gust of wind outside made him tense. It was no longer just his quiet life he was protecting. It was theirs, too. Vila had become quieter as the days passed, her eyes often distant, her mind clearly elsewhere. She would occasionally slip into a corner to meditate or rest, her sharp violet eyes scanning the windows for any signs of danger. Eli could see the toll the fear was taking on her. She didn't want to show it, didn't want to let him see how much Eli finally set down the knife, his attention now fully on her. He could see the strain in her eyes, the weight she had been carrying, and it touched him more than he could say. He had been through his own battles, but this was something different. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for them. "You don't have to thank me," Eli said quietly. "You don't owe me anything. I did what anyone would do. No one should have to live in fear, especially not children. You don't have to carry that weight alone." Viola looked at him, her eyes searching his face as if she were trying to understand his words. After a long moment she nodded, but the sadness didn't leave her gaze. "I don't want to put you in danger, Eli. I've already caused you more trouble than I ever wanted." Eli shook his head. "You didn't cause anything. I'm doing this because I want to. I've been alone for too long. Maybe that's why this feels right. Maybe that's why I'm here." Viola blinked, surprised by his honesty. Eli was not the type to share his feelings easily, but this was different. It wasn't just about doing the right thing anymore. It was personal. "I know you're afraid," Eli continued, his voice steady, "and I know that things might get worse before they get better. But we'll face it together. I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure this out." Her eyes softened as she absorbed his words. She had come here out of necessity, but somewhere, along the way, things had shifted. Eli had become more than just a shelter, more than just a protector. He had become someone she could trust. "I don't know what will happen next," she whispered. "I don't know if we'll make it through this. But what I do know is that I couldn't have made it this far without you, and that means something to me." Eli smiled, though it was a small, sad smile. "Then let's make sure we do make it. For you, for them, for all of us." The room grew quiet again, the soft crackling of the fire the only sound between them. For a moment, Eli just sat there, feeling the weight of the promise he had made. He had never thought of himself as someone capable of leading others, of taking on a responsibility like this. But somehow, in this moment, with Vila sitting beside him, he knew that he couldn't turn back. It wasn't just about protecting them anymore. It was about something deeper. It was about standing together no matter the cost. "I don't want to leave here," Vila said suddenly, breaking the silence. Her voice was quieter now, almost a whisper. "But I can't ask you to hide us forever. I don't want you to get hurt because of me." Eli turned to her, his expression firm. "We'll figure it out. I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe. I'm not afraid." Vila met his gaze, and for the first time in a long while, a small smile tugged at her lips. "I believe you," she said softly. The conversation drifted off into silence once more, but this time, It was a peaceful silence. The weight of their words had settled between them like a promise, and though neither of them knew what the future held, they both knew one thing for certain. They were no longer alone in this. As the night deepened, Eli turned back to the fire, the warmth surrounding him, as if it were a reminder of the promise he had made. He wasn't just protecting Vela and her children now. He was protecting something much more fragile. He was protecting hope. The days grew colder as Eli Vance and Vila continued to prepare for the unknown. Every morning, Eli worked tirelessly to secure the cabin. He added more locks to the doors, reinforced the windows, and even set up a small alarm system around the perimeter. He couldn't stop his mind from racing. The threat that Vela had warned him about was real, and he knew that no matter how much they tried to hide, danger could be lurking at any moment. As winter's chill deepened, news of an alien family living in a remote human settlement began to spread through the nearby town. The first few whispers were harmless, just curious talk from the people who lived closest to Eli. But as the days passed, the whispers grew louder, and soon there were more questions being asked. One morning, there was a knock at Eli's door. He opened it to find Captain Raylan, the leader of the local town council security force, standing on his doorstep. The captain was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a stern expression and the unmistakable air of authority. Eli had known him from his time as a soldier. Raylan was a no-nonsense kind of person, and Eli could tell from the look on his face that this visit was not a friendly one. "Eli," Raylan said, his voice low but firm, "we need to talk." Eli stood in the doorway, his heart beginning to race. He had been expecting this. He knew that eventually someone from the town would come asking about the alien woman and her children, but he wasn't ready for what came next. Raylan stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his gaze sweeping over the cabin. The small room was warm from the fire, and Vela was in the corner, looking up nervously as she noticed the captain's presence. "I've heard some things, Eli," Raylan continued, his tone sharp. "There's talk of a strange family living here. Alien visitors, is that what we're calling them now?" Eli kept his face neutral, doing his best to stay calm. He knew this was coming, but it earned them over to us. The council will decide what happens next. Eli's heart sank. He had expected it, but hearing those words out loud made the situation feel all the more real. If he didn't comply, they could take Vela and her children away. And who knew what would happen to them then? Vela had been listening from the corner, her posture tense. She slowly stood, walking over to where Eli was standing, her gaze focused on Captain Raylan. "Please," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "We have nowhere else to go. I've already lost everything, my people, my home, my mate. I don't want to lose my children too." Raylan's eyes flickered with something, perhaps sympathy, perhaps pity, but his expression remained hard. "I understand your situation, Vela, but you can't hide here forever. The council has made its decision. You're not allowed to. Stay here." Eli stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. "You don't understand. They're not just some aliens from another planet. They're people, and they're in danger. You have no idea what she's been through. No idea what those children have seen." Raylan's eyes narrowed, but he didn't back down. "I'm not here to debate, Eli. I'm here to do my job." The tension in the room was thick, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Eli felt a surge of anger rise within him. He knew what was at stake, and he couldn't let this happen. Not without a fight. "Tell the council I'll take full responsibility for them," Eli said, his voice growing stronger. "I'll keep them safe, I won't turn them in." Raylan stared at him for a long moment, as if weighing his words. Finally he sighed, his posture relaxing just a little. "I can't make any promises, Eli. The council has already made up its mind. But maybe there's still time to sort this out. If you want to keep them here, you'll need to convince the council to let you." Eli's heart skipped a beat. There was a chance. A small chance. But it was better than nothing. "I'll do whatever it takes," Eli said, his voice resolute. "I'm not giving them up." Raylan hesitated before nodding. "I'll give you a few days. But don't think the council will change its mind easily. This isn't something we can just sweep under the rug. With that, Raylan turned and left the cabin, leaving Eli and Vela standing in silence. As the door clicked shut behind him, Eli turned to Vela, his heart pounding. "I'll fight for you. I promise." Vela's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. She simply nodded, her gaze filled with gratitude and a quiet, unspoken fear. They didn't have much time, but Eli was determined. He wouldn't let them take her children. Not now. Not ever. The days following Captain Raylan's visit were filled with tension and uncertainty. Eli Vance spent long hours preparing for the council's decision, doing everything in his power to keep the cabin secure. The weather outside had turned bitterly cold, and the snowstorms that had been a regular part of winter now seemed to mirror the storm that had taken hold of Eli's life. Inside the cabin, though, there was warmth. Not just from the fire, but from the small family that had come to rely on him. Vila had become more at ease over the past few days, though she still carried the heavy burden of fear that seemed to haunt her every move. She spent most of her time near the children, trying to keep them calm and safe, her eyes always alert for any signs of danger. The little boy, whose name was Corin, had begun to relax a little. He was a curious child, with wide, innocent eyes that often followed Eli's every move. Corin was still unsure of the world outside, but in the safety of the cabin he had begun to play more, running around the room with his small, brightly colored toys, laughing as his sister chased him. The girl, Leora, was quieter, her large black eyes full of questions that she couldn't yet understand. She clung to Vela whenever Eli was nearby, and although she was small for her age, there was a maturity in her eyes that made Eli think she knew more than she let on. But despite the comfort of the children's laughter and the warmth of the fire, Eli couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The council had made its decision, and he still had no idea how he could change it. There were too many laws, too many rules to break, and the town was known for its strict stance on outsiders. He wasn't sure if he could convince anyone that what was happening here was worth fighting for. One evening, as the fire crackled softly in the hearth, Vela approached him, her face serious but with a new kind of determination. She had been quiet all day, as though processing the enormity of their situation, but now her gaze was steady, and there was a fire in her eyes that Eli hadn't seen before. "I've been thinking, Eli," she began, her voice quiet but filled with resolve. "If the council decides to take us away, if they won't listen to reason, I will leave. I'll take my children and go." Eli's heart sank at her words. He hadn't been ready for her to say this. He had hoped that they could stay, that he could find a way to convince the council to let them remain. But it seemed that Vela had already made up her mind. "No," Eli said firmly, his voice breaking the silence. "You don't have to leave. I won't let them take you. I promised you that I'd keep you safe, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you don't have to run anymore." Vela shook her head, though her eyes softened with emotion. "It's not just about staying, Eli. I don't want to be a burden on you. You've done more for us than anyone ever could. But I can't let my children live like this, constantly hiding, always running. They deserve a life of peace." Eli reached out and gently took her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. "I understand, but I've made a promise to you. You're not a burden to me, none of you are." Viola was silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on the fire. "I've lost everything, Eli. My home, my family. I don't know how much more I can take." "I know," Eli said quietly, his voice full of empathy. "But you don't have to go through this alone. I'm here. We're all in this together now. Whatever happens, I'll be by your side." For a long while, they sat together in silence, the weight of their words hanging between them. The fire flickered in the hearth, casting shadows on the walls of the cabin, and outside the snow continued to fall, covering the earth in a blanket of white. The next morning, Eli woke early to find Vela sitting by the window, staring out into the snowy landscape. Her face was calm, but there was a quiet determination in her posture that told him she had made a decision. When she turned to face him, her eyes were clear, and her voice was steady. I'll fight for my children, she said simply. If the council won't listen, then we'll have to find another way, but I won't give up. I won't let them take them from me. Eli nodded, his heart swelling with respect for her. He had never met anyone as strong as Vela. She had faced unimaginable loss and hardship, yet she still had the courage to stand up and fight for her children. I'll stand by you, Eli said quietly, his voice unwavering. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. And in that moment, as the storm raged outside and the world seemed so far away, Eli knew that this was no longer just about survival. It was about hope, about building a future, even when the past seemed so heavy. He had made a promise to Vela, to her children, and to himself, that he wouldn't let fear win. They would fight. They would face whatever came next. And together, they would find a way to make a new life for themselves, no matter the cost. As the days passed, they prepared for the council's final decision. Eli worked tirelessly to gather any evidence that might support their case, speaking with those in the town who might lend them a hand. Vela did what she could, taking care of her children, staying strong for them. The day finally came when Eli had to face the council. The room was cold, filled with the hushed murmurs of the town's leaders. Eli stood before them, his heart pounding in his chest, but his resolve unshaken. I'm asking you to listen, Eli said, his voice steady. Viola and her children are not criminals. They are not a threat. They are just a family trying to survive. We cannot turn them away. The room grew quiet as Eli's words hung in the air. Vela, sitting at the back of the room with her children, looked at him with gratitude, and for the first time Eli realized that they weren't just fighting for their survival. They were fighting for a new beginning, a future. And as he stood there, in that cold, quiet room, Eli knew that no matter what happened, they would not face the future alone.